And just like the whole explosion of the b-boy thing back in the 70s, from like the gang era, and just from kids that didn't have much to do, that were just creating these incredible movements to get out of the negativity that was consuming them. The whole b-boy style as a whole, man, spoke for itself. I mean, it was even down to like the jeans people wore, the sneakers, the kind of shirts, the attitude. You could see it. You could see the b-boyism in the face. In the style, you know, it was a lot different than the culture is now. You know, I mean, it's very huge in a lot of respects today than it was back then, because it's more, the jams are larger, and it exists in all the different countries and states around the world. But just back then, confined to New York and a couple other subsidiaries, you know, it came from the bone. You know, it was raw. The events, the jams were gritty. And you weren't just a b-boy just because you danced. You were a b-boy because you walked, because you talked, because the way your attitude, you know, the way your street mentality was. You look at the early footage, man, and you see brothers go down. It just breathes, you know. They were eating and breathing and living b-boying to the day that they, you know, that they would die. So us as b-boys, we carried it on. It's like I said, it's more than just a dance. It's a tradition, man. It's just the way you live, and it's never gonna die. You know, it faded away in the late '80s and all that. But we live in a different society and world now, where it's captured, it's held. Countless generations of young kids and the older guys all coming together and just culminating. The body limits being pushed to immense proportions. There's not going to be a limit to moves. There's not going to be a limit to what moves are going to be possible. It's going to keep growing and growing. So we're responsible for just holding people together. I mean, like, even the routines, if you look at some of the classic footage, some of the routines you would see or the moves would trip you out. You look at them like, how did you dudes ever think of doing that or doing this or coming up with this routine? But it was creativity at its rawest aspect. You know, you had to come up with something great, because it wasn't just all about going in and doing moves and being like that was it. You know, you were going in there and really show off and show something different. So the routine aspect was just coming up with different freezes out of like backspins or out of some kind of spin move or footwork. You had to really make an impression on the crowd, and most importantly, you had to make an impression on the other group, you know, the rivals. So these guys would come up with these different ways of expressing themselves, and it was all together, you know, in a world of b-boyism. You know, so you might see something that somebody else did, and you're like, damn, man, I should have thought of that. You know what I mean? And even the names. You know, you might be like, yo, where did these dudes come up with these different names and these weird names? But it's a combination. You know, some of the names were like nicknames that they grew up with, or just, you know, little funny names that they got on the streets, and some of the names were more or less b-boy names. You know, anything could be a name. You know, everybody has a different story. Every great b-boy has a different story of how their name came about or their style, and you want it to live up to your name. So if you had the name like Swift or Fast in your name, or you had something with legs, or you had something with hands, or if you had Glide in your name or something, whatever it was, you know, you had to live up to that name. That's belief. Otherwise, you were going to get ridiculed. And we took ridiculization very, very seriously. I mean, forget it. The DJ and the b-boy, that's the ultimate team right there. I mean, a lot of b-boys were DJs and a lot of DJs were b-boys, back and forth. And as a b-boy, you had to know your records. You had to know the names of the records, who, the breakdowns, even the words, because that was used as an arsenal for your dance. And the more in tune you was with the music, the more of an iller b-boy you could be. And the DJs were directly coinciding with the b-boys on what they wanted to hear. They knew what b-boy jams would get people set off. So I think out of anything in hip-hop, you know, from graffiti to rapping to DJing, b-boying, the b-boy and the DJ are probably the closest two links. Because, like I said, you know, you go into a jam, you know, many of the early jams where hip-hop was really happening and all the elements were present, you know, it took a good DJ to complement a good breaker, and that's hands down the truth. Even when I go to jams now, a lot of us b-boys get out there, you know, you want to hear really, really good records, and it really depends on what the DJ is rocking that makes us feel a certain way. So hands down, the b-boy and the DJ, that's it right there. The rawness of the 70s, because breaking was such a new thing back then. You know, a lot of the moves weren't so much complete. If you look at some of the early footage of people, you know, brothers going on and doing like 4-step, it wasn't completely complete. You know, the neck moves, some of the freezes, but at the same time you look at it, and there's a certain technique that was just captured. The way people went down when they completed those moves, you can almost look at different kinds of footage. And you can, if you didn't know the year of what was filmed, you can, if you have some kind of knowledge, you can look and say, okay, well, this footage is probably filmed around this time because of the kind of footwork or the kind of freezes or the way the spins look. It was just completely raw. It went along with the times, you know. The jams were rawer, the DJs were raw, the music was very raw, the style was like gritty, you know, back in the late 70s, early 80s. And every b-boy era has a certain kind of time frame to it, but I would say out of anything, obviously because of the origins that are involved, the late 70s and early 80s, you know, it's like that gritty era. You know, the events were like dark and deep. Same thing with the trains, with the graffiti art, you know, it's dark and deep. You know, you had to go down to these deep trenches and write, whereas, you know, nowadays, you know, graffiti's a little bit more of a prettier thing. You know, you can do something on a wall in the daytime, or, you know, in when it's not completely nighttime, and it's just, you know, whatever it is, whatever aspect of time, it just follows the agenda.